Welcome to the Entail AI podcast, discussions with marketing executives sharing the latest techniques for growing their businesses online.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Entail Podcast, where we host B2B and B2C marketing experts. And today I have the pleasure of having with me Nancy Boas, who's a product marketing expert who worked at companies like Sparta Science, Plum Design, Lead Gen Technologies, and all of these companies involve AI in them, which is also a very hot topic that we're going to speak about. Hi, Nancy. Very nice to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So, Nancy, before we start, we're going to speak today about mastering market differentiation and enabling content-driven strategy. But before we start, maybe you want to take a minute and introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Yes. Mentioned that I've been in AI for almost 10 years now, working in a variety of different applications. I really started kind of the AI path at a company called Nominum, which is more in cybersecurity, and have worked across in workforce management and movement health and a wide variety of AI applications. It's really interesting now what's happening, especially with ChatGPT coming out, just how fast AI has evolved. So I'm really happy to talk more about AI and content with you today.
So before we start, just about your personal experience, so usually the work that you do is around, in terms of marketing, is it more about product positioning? Is it closer to the brand? Is it more about the content, all of the above? Maybe you can describe a little bit about that.
Yeah. As a product marketer, what you really want to do is, a lot of what I do is product launch and go-to-market strategy and execution. So how are we bringing products to market, and how do we really use product marketing, if done well, really gets kind of cross-functional alignment, getting the product and engineering teams together with marketing and content and demand generation. And as we're releasing new features, making sure that we have the right message for the right person at the right time in the whole customer journey.
Yeah, I have to admit that in all that tech space, that's my favorite part. Really, I like marketing, but I really like when it has to do with the product itself, and it's in the context of product development as well. I think that's the most exciting. At least for me. So in the way of how B2B companies now are launching products or how they promote their products, what do you think are the most important aspects or the best practices for that?
I think the best practices are, so many companies, they launch products and they spend a lot of time internally thinking about, this is a really cool feature, it's a really cool function. But taking a step back, products need to really meet a need in the marketplace, and you need to really always consider what the customer's pain points are. Because if customers don't have pain, they don't actually have budget to buy a product. Right. So I think there's a lot of, when it comes to product marketing and content marketing, there's a lot of really technical stuff you can talk about. But the thing that's really the hook that's going to get people to read content or to engage with your brand is content that's going to really educate and entertain your audience.
Often, what you're speaking now about the pain point is definitely a very good point, and I see it quite a lot with clients that I speak to or prospects. You really need to define those pain points, and often and even like sales calls and so on, we speak about usually we start with the discovery call to really understand what's their situation, understand what are the problems that they're having, and we can really map out their situation and come up with the solution that's right for them. But in terms of product launch or product marketing, there's probably, often you have a set of features that address that, and each one can address a different problem or a different pain. So how do you reconcile that in the positioning?
Yeah. The way that I do it, I have a standard way of doing messaging, and I have a kind of a standard, positioning and messaging document. Again, I think it's really important to work cross-functionally on that messaging document. But, what you want to do is come up with what's your elevator pitch. If you're at a party, how are you going to describe this new feature that we're coming out with? And getting everyone, internally aligned on what that is, training your salespeople on what that is. And then what I do is I come up with 3 high-level benefit statements. Okay, so that you're getting away from features and functions and you're talking about overall, benefits and considering, of course, your customers' pain points in that. And then your features and functions can come under those 3 high-level overall benefits. But it gets you away from talking about this cool new, hey, we've got generative AI. Okay, everyone has generative AI. But what's it doing for me in my day-to-day, and how is it solving my problems? That's what we need to think about.
When you speak about these things and you have it laid out and you have these are the 3 principles I work by. It already shows me that you have an experience with that, and that it's probably you created a good methodology for that to solve that. I mean, often people are it's when you have it articulated that well, it's basically something that's very well thought of. And by the way, also your comment about we have generative AI, like everyone says now, like you're saying, everybody has it now.
Yeah, it's kind of like this what,
Yeah, exactly. I'm using Google Docs. Okay, so that's the playing field. Everybody does it now, but how do you stand out? And that brings me to my next question. So how do you use content to stand out? How do you structure your content around? I mean, how do you align it with the values that you wanna or the positioning of the product? How do you connect your content to that?
Yeah, I think, the companies that, there's a few different sort of when you go to market strategies, right? In some cases, you're going to be a category creator where you're like the Ubers of the world. Those are pretty rare. But in most instances, you're going to go in, it's a competitive landscape. And that's part of what we do as product marketers is really evaluate, what does the landscape look like? Who are the competitors out there? And how are we different? So I think the companies that do content well, and I would say content kind of aligns, ideally you've got a brand too that is going to stand out. I mean, that's really a way that you can stand out by having your brand personality and kind of stand out. Are you, who is your brand? And even coming up with things like voice and tone guidelines. Are you consultative? Are you friendly? Are you a fun brand? I mean, those are all key considerations. And then having your content kind of fit into that brand personality, I think is a way for you to really differentiate in the marketplace.
Do you think, by the way, I mean, now we see more and more, I mean, there's definitely a shift where people consume more and more content, I mean, in the form of videos, but also in general, social media. It used to be mostly through channels like TV, and then search. Search leads you mostly to text content, mostly to articles or product pages, but mostly text. And now you see more and more people consume content on social media. And it seems, and I mean, definitely the trend on social media is people want to hear it from the horse's mouth, right? They want to have an authentic experience to see a person who's probably more or less like them and hear it from them. And so how does that reconcile? How do you reconcile that with having to be being a company and being a brand and all, but still wanting to communicate with your audience as an individual in a way? So
I think you bring a really good point. And, we need to be human and we need to be authentic in our communications. And as a brand, you need to kind of constantly evolve. Your audience knows what they want, that they want to consume. So there's this kind of trend, they talk about the TikTokification of content, right? So how do you take some content that is, and the other thing I guess I want to say is think about what the journey is like, right? You need content for the top of the funnel. And then as people progress, you're going to need more and more in-depth technical content, white papers and things like that. But for the easy breezy stuff, you can certainly, like you were saying, Tom, have a thought leader, but have that thought leader, do a little video there. It's like, I'm going to tell you 1, 2, 3 things, right? And you can kind of make it fun and easily consumable. And, the reality is that there's data points on attention spans, and we know that attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, thanks probably in no small part to social media. Good, the bad, and the ugly there. But I think you really need to think about the ways that, and it kind of crosses. The other important consideration is, of course, your demographics, right? Who are you targeting? But I think even if you look at who's on Instagram these days and a lot of the platforms, I mean, that it's definitely even skewing a lot older. So I think even older people are looking at reels and looking at super easy breezy content too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that completely. I mean, I think most people consume more video content than text today, and they
Yes.
consume most of their video content on social media, including, chat apps like WhatsApp. You're getting a lot of videos there as well. It's not just Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. Um,
Yes.
it's actually the consumption there is probably like higher than TV today, and even the Netflix and so on. So there's definitely, I mean, there's a huge demand for video and of all kinds, and also the attention span. I think one of the reasons that the attention span is getting shorter and shorter is not only because of TikTok, or it's just because of there's so much content out there, and there's like more content to consume than you can, in a way. Even though you're still looking for like what's the next TV show to watch because you watched all of them, and you're looking for a good one. But still, there's more content to consume than you can. So you're looking to get the message across as quickly as possible. And I mean, short videos like TikTok style or even like YouTube Shorts are a great device, a great tool to do that, right? Which is
100%. Yeah, I was just going to say that there's, I'm a big fan of Gartner analyst research, and they, a couple of years ago, they actually talked about when it comes to the B2B sales cycle, there's not a shortage of high quality content out there. To your point, I mean, years ago they even said that people are fed like at least a book's worth of content every day. But the like sales reps that do the best job are those that actually help buyers make sense of all the content. And as B2B marketers, we need to think about, getting back to that customer journey. What's the right content at the right time? How am I listening? Like you were saying, discovery calls, and listening and actually understanding one's pain points, but then serving up that right content. Because, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that we're drowning in content. We have more content than we could consume in 10 lifetimes at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's also interesting the way you speak about, content for different stages of the funnel. It's very similar to what we do to our approach at Entail, where basically what our software does. I mean, we map topics based on their funnel stage for each business. I mean, if you're selling, I don't know, if you're selling headphones, your funnel looks different than a company selling, I don't know, TVs. Okay.
Yes.
So, and that's very true. It's also true in B2B. Like some content is like top of the funnel, brand awareness, and so on. Then other content is much more like closer to the bottom of the funnel, speaks about the product, much more almost like intimate, you could say. And it also has to do with how much work you invest in each type of content based on where it is at and the impact it can do. So yeah, that's very interesting. Again, also back to the point of like the fact that there's no shortage of content. We're looking more and more into thought leadership content, content that shows unique perspectives. In B2B companies, it's often from business leaders or the industry experts within the company. Often they're also the business leaders. And so it's more about like creating thought leadership content rather than, like the old school content of like, I don't know, if you're selling a product that has to do with calculating profits, then you would explain how to do a profit and a P&L report in a spreadsheet. But that's something that ChatGPT can do for you now.
Right.
So it's really more about, the content that the machine can't create, which is about the human experience. It's basically thought leadership in a way. So how do you think companies should go about creating that type of content?
Well, I think, I think most companies are kind of hip to that point of thought leadership content, and even taking making sure that your executives are trained. They should be out there and be thought leaders. something that's kind of interesting too, just as a side note, is that, with the current political environment, more and more buyers are actually looking to executives now for kind of almost like things like sustainability and environmental impact. They actually almost trust more in like the CEOs or the executives than they do in politicians. So I really think that it's important that executives and leaders really understand they're a part of content strategy, and they're trained on things like the brand values and the voice that we want to use. But then, getting back to, I think, the importance, you also want to be authentic, and you also want to be trusted, and share things genuinely, and be really, I guess, thoughtful and generous in the way that you're sharing content. So, I think thought leadership from a variety of different perspectives too, getting back to like, as we think about who the personas are that we're targeting, who are the buyers. In some cases, it might be thought leadership from a CTO that's going to resonate with a technical audience. In some cases, it's going to be a chief customer officer, or even a customer success manager that's telling some authentic, customer stories or best practices. So really making thought leadership a part of kind of a company's DNA, I think, is really important. And I think the broader range of voices you can have within a company, the better you're going to be when it comes to content strategy.
And so, and what do you think about, I mean, there's so many different, or there are different social media platforms, and probably every platform resonates with a different type of audience or different type of content. But once you create thought leadership content, you can use it in different platforms. So how would you go about, do you share the same type of content across different platforms, or do you like repurpose it specifically per platform?
I would repurpose it for the platform. And, part of what we do as a product marketer is really defining who are the personas that you're going after. Talk about like a technical buyer might consume content in a different way. They might want to go to a Wired magazine. There's probably certain influencers or bloggers that they're following, for example, whereas like a finance persona is going to be, maybe from a big publication perspective, reading Forbes or following different thought leaders on X or Instagram or whatnot. So you really need to think about who are the personas that you're going after, what is their day-to-day like, and most importantly, how are they consuming information? And then, yes, repurposing content 100%. If you do it right, I'm a big believer in having both long and short form content, right? So I love to do a big meaty ebook or industry research report, but then you can repurpose that. You can TikTokify it. You can make a little video. You can do blog posts. You can do a webinar even. You can take that information and even create slides and pitch decks based on it. So yeah, I think, having, that's really part of your strategy, having, spending some time on meaty pieces of content and then breaking it off into different formats for social media works well.
Yeah, we actually developed a process that's very similar to what you're saying now, where, for example, if we're working on our website and we map all the new pages that we want to build, and then within those pages, the topics that have to go into every page before we even write the copy, and the design and all that. And then what we've realized that, often, so you'll do like a product page, let's say, or a feature page on your website. And then usually they're built, like you have a title, a description, image, then you have like sections with title, descriptions, images, and a call to action. And often the call to action would be like start now, book a demo. And then you also often have a button like learn more that takes you to a guide that explains about that. And what we've seen is that when you create the content for the page, and each section could have like a learn more button, then just like what you said now, when you create the content and you put all the thought into every small section on the page, you're basically doing the same process that you need to do when you want to create that guide that you want to link to, that learn more guide. And so in one process, you can create the product page and also all the satellite content, and
Yeah.
perhaps like deck slides or like content also for social media. So that's very, very efficient, and it creates great content. The only challenge there is that people are busy, that because when you start like that, you start with one page and then all the content you can link out to, you end up with a lot of pieces of content. It it lacks up all of your time. But that's definitely, in terms of content creation, that's very, very.
Well, yeah, no, yeah, that's true. But you can also, I think people are okay with scrolling. I'm a big fan of doing like a microsite. Something I did recently at Sparta Science, for example, we did a whole campaign just on the importance of balance, right? Because there was this data point that came out. There was research that came out in 2022 that said, if you can't stand on one leg for more than 10 seconds, that's a greater indicator of mortality than other things, even like high blood pressure, for example. So we did a whole campaign and an ebook and an infographic on balance and the other areas that are impacted by balance. For example, when you have a concussion, that is going to impact your balance. You could have even in like a vestibular system disorder, neurological disorder, they're all impacted by balance. So the whole infographic on this, there were some product features that were related to this, what's called a progressive balance scan, where for older people, if you're just shifting, we're still going to be able to, you can't stand on one leg if you're sometimes over 70 years old, but if you're shifting around, we still can get some sense of how you're balancing. So there's very sort of specific product features related to balance, but built this entire sort of microsite just devoted to balance, where you had all this different consumable content. And, looking at the metrics before and after, an average web page had maybe 40 seconds, but people were actually spending more like 4 minutes just on this page, because I think you can have that meaty content. And you can also do things like having anchors so that even if you want to just go to one page of that website, you can put that in emails or social media posts so that people don't have to scroll. They're going directly to that content.
So you create all this content. So how about distribution? So you mentioned email and social media. So how do you decide also if you want to use paid channels, for example? For some content, you may use paid channels, for others you don't. How do you go about doing that?
That's a good question. And, the nice thing with paid channels is I can't tell you how many times working with like the growth or demand gen directors, we try to use paid channels and then we decide this isn't really working. Or we use paid channels and then we're constantly tweaking it. It's not like you necessarily go, I'm going to put $10,000. I would never advise someone to put $10,000 in a paid channel. The beauty is that you can spend like $100 a day and see what kind of results you're getting, tweak it, and maybe you just stop the campaign if it's not working. But it's a great sort of test bed using paid channels. So I would say, for a lot of content, using a paid channel works well. But you also have to kind of think about, what do you want to get? Are you looking at, with a white paper or an ebook, are you trying to get leads? Are you trying to get people just to read your blog? That needs to inform the strategy too.
Yeah, I mean, when you do a paid campaign with content, it's often either to get like leads or people signing up to a webinar. So it means like you need to build a funnel to be able to capitalize on the traffic that you generate, right?
Yes, you do, and some people even go the route of doing a guaranteed leads program too, which you can do, again, depending on who's your audience that you want to reach, what kind of publications are out there. But a lot of times, industry-specific publications will have a guaranteed leads program where they'll say, we're going to have 100 people attend your webinar. It's not inexpensive, but it's one way of going about syndicating your content.
So that means you pay a publisher to publish your content, and they can guarantee a number of leads signing up to.
So that they actually have their own, as opposed to you doing your landing page, they'll have their own landing page, and then they basically just send you the names of people that, it's controlled by them. You're not controlling it, but they'll send you leads. How high quality, I've had some success with those sorts of programs. In some cases, might get some Gmails or Yahoo addresses, which, we never want as B2B marketers. We want company emails whenever possible.
It's very difficult in marketing, especially when you're doing things. I mean, when you're running a campaign on Meta or Google, for example, and then it's basically it's a machine that works. It's not like you do need to change creatives, you need to optimize and all that, but it's much easier because it's like a train, you're on the tracks and you can speed up or slow down, but there's not too many options. But when you go to a publisher like that, or when you're trying new things, you never know what you're going to get. I mean, if you do it with a publisher and you get good leads, you'll probably keep on doing that if it ends up generating positive ROI, right?
Yeah.
But in many cases, that's like it's like a gamble. And I mean, I'm often wondering about because I hear from some of our clients sometimes, when they do campaigns like that. I mean, one guy, he told me they paid this publication in the UK about £20,000 basically for an article. I think it drove them maybe like $1,000 in sales. Okay, and
Right.
and so I wonder how they make up a decision like that. And another thing is, if those publishers are taking so much money and they're delivering no results, I mean, how can they keep that up? Because if they deliver results, you're gonna be a repeat buyer, right?
Yeah. I mean, people wouldn't be a repeat buyer, but there are certain industry publications that have a lot of subscribers. I mean, that's one of the things you want to look at. What does the subscriber base look like? And go back to your personas. Who are we trying to target? Do we have a bunch of CTOs or CIOs or, those sort of personas? And are they part of the subscriber base that could potentially be downloading a paper or attending a webinar? I think these sorts of paid programs, really, I wouldn't rule them out. I think they could work. But you just have to be prepared to sift through, and you have to be really analytical about what's the quality of these and making sure that you have, proper attribution so that you're using your CRM and you're actually seeing, did this one interaction ultimately lead to some pipeline, some revenue generation?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's often also for me because we've done things like that, and it's just very difficult to anticipate, which is often the problem in marketing, and that's why I think also why Google and Facebook are so successful, because you can start on a small budget and test your way through until you're successful. But how do you go about? So you did mention a few good tips, like check out the subscriber base and see if that's your ICP, if that's like your ideal client profile. So what other measures can you take before you spend? Because often many of them don't have an option of like just spending a little bit to see how it works. Also for us, by the way, as an organic marketing platform, like doing organic is not inexpensive because there's also the cost of creating content.
Yes.
By the way, with ChatGPT, it didn't become cheaper. It actually became more expensive because you need to do better content because of the hyperinflation of content.
Yeah.
And also, like it takes time. Often, organic takes time. So how do you assess those? Do you have any other thing you can do besides looking at the subscriber base, which I don't know if you always have access to that as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think, as I say, I don't know that that's like a catch-all. It's one of many, ways that you can syndicate your content. But I think you need to just meet with the people, the publishers, and hear their success stories. And to your point, yeah, usually they want about $10,000. They're not just going to let you do a little test for $100 a day.
Yeah.
But I think, as B2B marketers, we're still in this, and we talk, like we can talk more about ABM or intent-led marketing or things like that. But there's still a lot of pressure from sales to have leads. That's still the reality of it. Even though people don't want to say that leads are dead and things like that, they still want people that they can call. So I think that's what puts us marketers in a position to sort of start to investigate some of those more industry specific publications. And I think another thing to think about with doing more industry, it's not just content in the form of white papers or things like that, but another way that might generate a better ROI is doing like a partnered webinar, where if you're partnering with someone who is an industry expert and they have the subscriber base that you want, then you've got, ideally you can have reusable content, and they're going to do some of the promotion to a new audience that's not in your database. I think you can I've had some success in doing that sort of thing too.
Okay, that's actually a good idea. Yeah, so just you're talking about joining someone's podcast or somebody who does, for example, product reviews, and they have their own audience already, right?
Yeah, or they're doing, they might even be doing industry research. I mean, I can think about when I was at Plume, we worked with some people that did, like broadband specific research on, rural broadband trends, for example. Partnering with some of those people that already, we know that smaller ISPs or mid-sized ISPs are already going to them as a trusted resource for information. Mm-hmm. I think there's some value in that.
Yeah, definitely. And so in terms of generating results from your content over time, I mean, it's definitely, becoming a company that creates content regularly. And by the way, just a side note on that, I mean, I do see it quite a lot. I mean, you could divide the world basically into maybe 3 categories. And when you talk about content and organic, there's companies who are, I always say, are like almost cynical. They do paid. Their DNA is paid performance. You put $1, you get $1.50, 2, 3 back, and that's measurable. That's very easy, very quick, and that's what they do. And you can't move them from their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And then there's companies who also do some content. They don't really know why, because they don't really measure it.
Right.
And then there's companies that are serious about content, that are creating content over time. You see, usually they build bigger brands and so on. It's very difficult to move companies from category A of just being a performance-based, just, paid channels to, category of content creators. So I've just seen that it's really a challenge, and for many companies, it's a shift that's not really possible. By the way, to move from the organic to the paid is easier than the other way around, from what I've seen.
I mean, I think one of the things that I really like to think about, like I studied journalism back in the day at school, and I really would encourage companies to kind of think about the old days where you're almost like an editorial team. And you're thinking about what are the stories that we want to tell in the marketplace, and meeting on a regular basis, a weekly basis even, looking at all of the trends that are out there and thinking about if your product is aligning with some of those trends, right? Years ago, we used to talk about this idea of newsjacking. There's some important trend, and our brand can actually get associated with that trend. So I think really trying to build that muscle internally of thinking like editors, thinking about the headlines, thinking about sizzling content that's going to bring your buyers to you is really important.
It reminds me of a quote that I really like by one of the founders of HubSpot, where he says something along the lines of back in the day, media companies had to have software companies in them to make it work. Tech companies now have to have a media company in them to be able to do marketing, especially because of like what we're saying about the inflation of content. And I think that point of the journalistic approach of like telling a story, which is, by the way, I've been for recruiting marketers, I've been starting to look more and more at journalists, because
yes,
for a few reasons. By the way, it's a tip I got from somebody that told me that, and she's an expert content person, and she told me that, and name is Corinne Maytal, by the way, just so I give her credit for that. So she told me, I mean, often in journalism, people are not paid as well as in tech, and they get to work quite hard, and they become really professional with content.
Yes.
And for them to move from journalism to tech could be like an upgrade. And so you can find people that can be very, very talented. And there is a small like learning curve. It's not huge, but they bring a different approach than the, let's say, traditional tech marketer. And that can be very, very beneficial for a business.
It's 100% beneficial. And a lot of tech companies spend tons and tons of, effort into hiring really technical people, and they can write super technical papers. But as we've been discussing, you need to think about, the top of the funnel content and stuff, just easy storytelling. And I think what works in the press that, definitely works when it comes to B2B marketing, right? If you read, press releases or things that in the New York Times or whatever your publication is, B2B companies should really start thinking about how can we write that sort of content that people are going to consume? How do we use that to stand out as a brand?
Yeah. And it's, at the end of the day, it's really about changing from the traditional SEO content creation, which I still see companies doing that because it's easy. They go on SEO tools that basically give you a structure or an article, and they tell you, okay, because they compare with what's already ranking, and they tell you, okay, you need this section and this keyword and that keyword. And I'm completely against it, because if the machine tells you how to create content, then let the machine do it. Okay. There are many things in our lives that we don't do anymore because the machine do them better than us.
Right.
It's in food, it's in many other industries where, I'm just not going to do it. The machine does it better than me, so why should I? Even though there's still value in like handmade work and so on. But at the end of the day, if you're creating content, in my opinion, you should not use tools like that. The main thing you should consider is like, do I have something interesting to say? Do you have a story to tell?
Yes.
Do you have something to share? Because if you're creating content for the sake for SEO, like, go use an SEO tool, it tells you how to write your content, and you can, check. That's not gonna fly. That's not, and Google is gonna dislike that content because Google needs to keep up with social media.
Yeah.
Social media is stealing more and more of Google's traffic. I mean, probably Google used to be about 8 times all the traffic of social media combined. Even if you don't stay a long time on Google, you search there. You tell Google what's your intent, what you're looking for. That's why they can turn that intent into marketing, and they can make so much money. But now people are spending more and more time on social media. I mean, the number of views for short videos on all the platforms, because all of them are using them now, Facebook, Instagram, of course, YouTube. It's like the number of views is insane. It's very, very addictive as well. So it's stealing away traffic from Google.
Oh, 100%. And then there's also, it's an AI browser. It's called Arc Search, actually, that is giving you short summaries. So, using AI is giving you short summaries of articles with the notion of even clicks, because so many businesses like Google have relied on clicks for so long. That's going to kind of go away. So it's a very interesting space, as you say, with social media channels and new ways of reaching audiences. Yeah.
And it's also very interesting because, I mean, in SEO, you can kind of like, manipulate the algorithm still, because it's very technical, and Google is showing you content that's almost like universally correct, because they have all these indicators, the ranking factors. And even though, it can be different between countries, if you Google the word God in different countries, different continents, you're going to get different results. But still, it's more like almost like universally correct. What's the best credit card? What's the best bank? And so on. You're going to get results like that. Whereas on social media, it's not really about that. And eventually on social media, especially on platforms like TikTok that rely less and less about followers, it's really about the content itself.
Yeah, it's about virality.
Yeah. And it's that. And so, I mean, virality is kind of like a loaded term, because, people always want to be viral. But at the end of the day, it's about how good your content is. Social media now is like a drug, it's built in a way. It wants to get us addicted all the time. Eventually, it's about the quality of the content and how good it is. And so if you're just doing like structured content like the machine does, if it's content that the machine can create, if ChatGPT can create that content, then your content is not needed.
Right.
You need to have something special to say, something interesting to say, something that burns in you to like, you want to spit it out, you want to share it with the world.
Yes.
That's the content that you should do, because otherwise it's like it's probably quite mediocre, and like ChatGPT can do that, or Bard, Gemini.
Yeah. I think you're right. I've been involved in a lot of these SEO projects where they tell you, oh, here are the key terms, and make sure that your H1, between the H1 tags, you have this content. And honestly, it just feels like it's not authentic. It's not necessarily some of the sort of personality just becomes bland if all you're trying to do is tailor your content for SEO purposes.
Yeah, I agree. And you can see that, like I say, that's very structured. It feels like artificial.
Yeah.
And just, checking out social media, doesn't matter which platform, and the content on social media. Actually, I can say that I think TikTok is really the best in terms of the quality of how engaging and interesting the content is on TikTok. And it's quite surprising, because many people still think that TikTok is just for kids or whatever. You can find a lot of content also that would attract business executives, and you'll see that a lot of that content has a lot of views, and it's not kids watching that content on TikTok. But what I wanted to say is that when you watch content on TikTok, and besides the fact that it has this miraculous way of finding topics that you find interesting even without you knowing that, but it's also very impressive to see the quality of the content and the creativity that you see there. And when you look at that, that's something that's completely opposite to the trend of, optimizing your H1s according to what, the software says. And the software does it based on content that was already created and ranked on Google. So it's kind of like a model collapse. It's a kind of an incest. You don't bring any new genes.
Yeah.
You don't bring anything new into that. And I think that's, I don't think that's really a good way of creating content, even if it does still work for many companies, these days, for creating content for Google. But I think that it's as a kind of a best practice, or as a practice in general, it's not going to stay for long.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm not an expert in SEO, and maybe you can have an SEO expert as a future guest. But I tend to agree with you. I mean, how at the end of the day, how important is doing SEO or loading your stuff with keywords for rankings? I don't know.
It's like, I can tell the way we look at it, because at Entail, a lot of the traffic that we generate for our clients is SEO based. And so we look a lot at what Google is doing now and what we think they're planning on doing, because Google is a big company.
Kind of a black box, right? So you don't know what they're using in terms of ranking.
Yeah, but also, I mean, another thing is that, Google is a huge company. And for them, when they realize they need to make a change, I mean, the time that passes between when they realize they need to make a change until they actually roll it out, it can be 6 months to a year easy, because it's a huge product and they have thousands of developers working on that. So you, in a way, you want to be proactive. You don't just want to be, just responsive and say, okay, there was an algorithm change, now let's do this content or that content. You can see the trend.
Right.
And you can see that the main principles, the constant principles, and which are that Google needs to provide the best results, the best search results on the internet. Otherwise, you're gonna search elsewhere. Like Arc, you mentioned, Arc has a unique way of showing search results.
Yeah.
There was, back in the day, there was a product called Aardvark, where two very smart, you can see actually still videos on YouTube about them, the two very smart entrepreneurs who created a product where if you ask a question, it would redirect your question to an expert.
Oh.
And the expert would answer that. And they built this network, and Google acquired them for $50 million, and they basically shut them down. So Google is keeping their eyes out for anything that can threaten them. I mean, not just ChatGPT. And in general, you can see that the trend is that people want to see videos, they want to see unique perspectives, expertise, human experience, authenticity, and all that. And for that reason, Google will have to keep up with that, and they will not be able to keep on showing just blue links and text and link only to articles. Because if they want to stay the number one place that people go to search for things, they're going to have to show a lot of videos as well. Because if Google is Google is the gateway to the internet, to where you consume content and where you find the content you want to consume in a search way, not in a discovery way, like on other platforms, even though they try to do that as well. If they want to stay relevant in that game, they will have to show quite a lot of videos in their results. And they will have to show content that's more and more like social media, because that's what we like now.
Of course. Look at, Instagram and Facebook both learned from what TikTok was doing, and now they're trying to be like. That's why they're serving, they're serving Reels and serving all that video content center. Yeah.
That's why I think, Google will not try to build another Google Plus again now, because it was a failure. But they want to be the number one search engine, to stay the number one search engine. So they'll have to index social media as well and show that in the results.
Which is very interesting, different conversation to think about. Their whole business model is based on clicks, right? So what happens video and
exactly that's a big deal for Google. Yeah. So that may be a topic for another conversation. I mean, it's been super interesting.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.